Labour telling their own Prime Minister that he needs to get his act together or he might risk losing the actual election. I mean, this is pretty unprecedented stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is, and and also I think the fact that it's happening so early in the election cycle, just about a year or so since the last election, and you can just feel it when I speak to Labour MPs, Labour ministers. They are very, very jittery. Immigration.
Everything he has said, this afternoon is total nonsense, obfuscation, avoiding the question. He doesn't have any answers. It's disgraceful. I asked him, Mr. Speaker, about the two-child...
Westminster has plunged into open chaos. For the first time in decades, a Labour leader is facing a full-scale internal revolt. Keir Starmer, once hailed as the party's safest route back to power, now finds himself surrounded by hostile MPs as a no-confidence vote barrels toward Parliament. What began as faint whispers of discontent has erupted into a political storm, threatening not only his leadership but the future direction of Britain itself. This is no longer a routine party dispute. It is a battle over Brexit's legacy, national sovereignty, and the shattered trust between politicians and the public. Tonight, tensions inside Westminster have reached breaking point, and the outcome could reshape British politics for a generation.
Been one of the sort of big three subjects we compare it to the cost of living crisis and the NHS, but it just seems to be ratcheting up even higher. And we've had backbenchers, Joe White, Graham Stringer, Jonathan Brash, all talking about how there will be an electoral reckoning if Sir Keir Starmer doesn't actually get to grips with this. Now,
for months, frustration had been quietly simmering beneath the surface. Murmurs echoed through Labour corridors, complaints of secrecy, strategic failures, and a leadership increasingly detached from its own MPs. Now, the dam has burst. Furious representatives from Leave-voting constituencies have taken the fight directly to Starmer, their patience finally exhausted. The spark was a leak his inner circle believed could be buried. A private deal with Brussels, stitched together behind closed doors and packed with concessions that even senior allies had not been fully briefed on. Its contents were explosive. Regulatory authority, trade standards, and fisheries policy quietly handed back to the EU. Buried deep in the appendices was the return of European Court of Justice oversight, something Brexit voters swore would never happen again. Inside Parliament, the language turned brutal. Betrayal, deception, a slow-motion reversal of Brexit through backroom deals. MPs who once stood shoulder to shoulder with Starmer are now denouncing him publicly. Shadow cabinet members admit they learned the full scope of the agreement from newspapers, not their own leader. What was billed as Starmer's defining diplomatic triumph has detonated into political disaster. Across the country, the backlash is fierce. Councillors are resigning. Labour's traditional base, fishermen, farmers, factory workers, are calling it outright betrayal. Disillusioned MPs have joined forces with Conservatives and Reform UK to push a no-confidence motion. Hours after Starmer claimed a breakthrough, leaked papers told a very different story. Not victory, but Britain's independence quietly signed away.
Nothing seems to be happening. Nothing seems to be changing. The numbers still seem to be very, very high. And you contrast that with the small sort of measures that the government are coming up with. You compare that with this sort of big bang attitude and policies of Nigel Farage today, who says we're going to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. People are going to be deported. They're going to be held within a month in detention centres or migration centres and then sent back to the country where they came from. It's like chalk and cheese.
The Conservatives moved swiftly, branding the deal a constitutional disgrace. Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, struck with ruthless precision. Farage flooded national television with a single, devastating message. Starmer had delivered the greatest betrayal of Brexit since the referendum itself. The response was immediate. Reform UK's membership surged. Online rallies exploded. Social media filled with clips of packed halls chanting Farage's name as polling numbers shifted in real time. What once looked like a fringe protest movement suddenly became a serious electoral threat that in less than 24 hours, Starmer's image collapsed. The calm strategist gave way to a rattled leader, snapping at journalists, fumbling answers, retreating from cameras. The mask of competence slipped, replaced by visible desperation. MPs who once defended him now privately ask whether he has already crossed the point of no return. Beyond Westminster, public anger is boiling. The leaked framework for EU convergence is not just a trade agreement. It is a roadmap, critics say, for quietly steering Britain back into Brussels' orbit, covering more than 24 sectors, from environmental rules to digital markets and financial regulation. It stops short of rejoining the EU, but enforces creeping alignment without a single public vote.
We've heard Sir Keir Starmer. He's been talking to Italy's Giorgia Meloni. He's been to Albania. He's been talking about these offshoring centres, trying to come up with this kind of Rwanda-style deterrent. He really needs to spend the next few months coming up with something, coming up with a policy that is akin to that, just to send this message to people at migrants who want to make that crossing. Because I think
inside Labour, the backlash has been volcanic. MPs from Leave constituencies were stunned to discover the details not from their leader, but from front-page headlines. One senior figure described it as the most brazen act of deception they had witnessed in decades. When Appendix C revealed European Court of Justice oversight over trade disputes, corporate law, and even immigration policy, fury became uncontainable. Legal experts warn it could permanently bind future parliaments, calling it a constitutional time bomb. The scandal deepened further. Intelligence leaks suggest Starmer's advisors held repeated, undeclared meetings with European officials across Brussels, Berlin, and Paris. None recorded, none disclosed. Draft frameworks were exchanged, talking points coordinated. A classified MI5 assessment reportedly flagged a senior communications advisor for maintaining direct contact with a former EU Commission legal officer tied to Brexit negotiations. The implication was chilling. This went beyond diplomacy and into potential breaches of the ministerial code, or worse. Investigative journalists soon uncovered troubling financial trails. Labour-aligned think tanks in London and Brussels received hundreds of thousands of pounds from EU-linked policy groups. One payment alone, over £750,000, was routed through a fund chaired by a former vice president of the European Parliament. Officially labelled strategic communications research, critics argue it looks far more like foreign-funded political influence. Reform UK has seized on the revelations, branding them the most blatant act of subversion since the Iraq dossier scandal. As the scandal spills beyond Westminster, the country is erupting. Protests are spreading fast. Constituency offices in Leave areas are vandalized with EU flags and the word betrayal. Fishermen organize flotillas, threatening direct action. Factory workers demand Starmer's resignation. In Leeds, Labour membership cards burn on camera. In Sunderland, crowds chant, "We voted Leave." Outside party offices, social media has poured fuel on the fire. Hashtag Brexit betrayal trends relentlessly. Videos of defections, protests, and Farage rallies dominate timelines. Even traditionally Labour-friendly spaces now demand Starmer step down. The media has gone into overdrive. Tabloids scream betrayal, broadcasters host furious call-ins. Commentators compare Starmer's collapse to Theresa May's final days and Tony Blair's Iraq fallout. Inside Labour, discipline has collapsed. MPs openly defy the whip. Local branches threaten to withdraw campaign support. Senior figures quietly test leadership bids. The inner circle has fractured into rival camps. Witnesses describe Starmer raging behind closed doors, threatening rebels, lashing out at the press. The composed barrister persona is gone, replaced by a leader unraveling under pressure. Insiders claim more than a dozen MPs are ready to abstain or vote against him. If true, the no-confidence motion could succeed, forcing a leadership contest at the worst possible moment. Even survival may be fatal, leaving Starmer as leader in name only, stripped of authority and trust. What began as a leaked document has spiraled into a national crisis, one involving intelligence briefings, financial trails, and a mass movement in the streets. Britain now waits, restless and divided, as a rebellion over Brexit threatens not only to end a leadership, but to redraw the country's political future.